The stars were quiet. For many weeks, the alien world of Kareth had waited in fear. Their cities were still standing, their people still alive, but deep in their hearts, they knew time was running out. Kareth was once a proud world, rich with tall crystal towers and great oceans that reflected their twin suns, but now those towers stood in silence, the oceans empty of ships. The enemy had struck fast and cruel. They were known as the Vorash, a ruthless empire that conquered without mercy. When the Vorash came, no one was safe. The Carethians had only one hope, the Old Alliance. Long ago, their people had joined a great council of stars. There were allies, protectors, and friends among them. Whenever danger rose, the council answered. And so, when the Vorash attacked, the Carethians sent a desperate signal across the void. It was not just a message, it was a cry for help. In the high tower of the capital city, the council leader stood before the glowing console. The message had been sent days ago, repeated again and again, carried by powerful transmitters across light years of space. Every Carethian child, every family, every soldier waited. They believed, someone will come. Someone must come. But the days grew long, and the sky above remained empty. The people began to whisper, "Why has no one answered? Have they abandoned us? Is this the end of Kareth?" Fear grew heavier than stone. At night, the cities glowed with dim blue lights, but the people did not celebrate or rest. They stayed awake, staring into the sky, searching for ships that never came. And then, one evening, the console in the tower came alive. A signal. A reply. The leader's hands trembled as the message appeared. The translation was brief, almost too brief. Only 3 words. "We are coming." The council chamber filled with gasps. Relief spread like a wave. People cried out, some falling to their knees. The children ran to tell their families. "They heard us, the Allies heard us." Bells rang across the capital. For the first time in weeks there was hope. But the leader's eyes narrowed. Something felt strange. The old allies, the ones they trusted, would never send such a short reply. They were formal, careful, full of kindness in their words. Yet this message was cold, sharp, almost military in tone. Still, there was no time to question. A fleet was on its way. Hours passed, then days. On the 3rd night, the sky over Kareth came alive. Dozens of lights appeared, streaking like falling stars. They were ships, vast and dark, cutting through the void with speed and purpose. The Carethians gathered in the streets. Families stood together, pointing at the glowing dots in the heavens. Children laughed, believing salvation had arrived. The soldiers raised their flags, ready to welcome their saviors. But the leader felt a weight in his chest. He remembered the old stories, the ones told in secret. Not all species in the galaxy were gentle. Not all alliances were safe. The ships entered orbit. They were massive, larger than any Carethian vessel, built for war, their hulls scarred by countless battles. They looked nothing like the elegant, shining vessels of the old allies. These ships were angular, armored, and bristling with weapons. The crowd below fell into silence. Fear returned, and then a voice thundered through the comms. It was not soft, it was not kind, it was deep, strong, and commanding. "This is the fleet of the Deathworlders. We have heard your cry." The Carethians froze. The word spread from mouth to mouth like fire. Deathworlders. Everyone knew the name. Legends spoke of them. They were humans, from a place so hostile it was called a death world. A world where storms destroyed cities, where animals were predators, where survival was not given but earned every day. A world that made its people dangerous. To the Carethians, the Deathworlders were monsters and saviors both. Some said they fought with unmatched fury. Others whispered that they were too violent, too unpredictable. No one ever called them friends. Now, those very Deathworlders had answered the signal. The people of Kareth did not know whether to cheer or to tremble. The leader of Kareth spoke softly, almost to himself. We asked for help, and help has come. But is this salvation? Or is this a new danger? In orbit above, the Deathworlder fleet turned its weapons toward the stars, scanning for threats. The ships moved like predators on the hunt. To the Carithians below, their saviors looked more like conquerors. The children still cheered. The soldiers still saluted. The families still wept in relief. But deep inside, in the hearts of the leaders and the wisest among them, a question remained. When the Deathworlders come, who truly survives? And with that question, the signal of hope became a signal of fear. The Carithians had called out for rescue, but what had answered was something else entirely. The skies above Carith burned with streaks of fire. The Deathworlder fleet had arrived. At first the people cheered. For many days they had prayed for help, and now ships filled the heavens. Huge shadows passed over the land as war vessels took position in orbit. But as more eyes looked upward, the joy began to fade. These ships were not like the vessels of the Council allies. There was no golden shine, no graceful curves, no soft colors. The Deathworlder ships were dark, jagged, and scarred with age. Their hulls carried marks of old battles, as if every ship had survived 100 wars. From the ground, the ships looked alive, like predators circling above their prey. In Fo, the capital city, the council leader stood with his advisors. They stared at the massive shapes moving across the sky. Fear and wonder mixed in their hearts. The leader whispered, "These are not the allies we expected." The advisors exchanged nervous glances. One of them, a young scholar, trembled as he spoke. The legends were true. These are humans. These are Deathworlders. The room grew cold. Everyone knew the stories. Deathworlders were not gentle. They were not peaceful. They came from a world of storms, predators, and endless danger. Every child of their world learned to fight from birth just to survive a single day. To other species they were a paradox, too savage to be trusted yet too strong to be ignored. And now they had come to Carith. A voice cracked through the airwaves, deep and heavy. Every speaker, every device in the city carried it. "This is Commander Harkon of the Deathworlder Fleet. We have received your signal. You asked for aid. We have come." The words echoed through every home and street. Families clutched one another, uncertain whether to celebrate or hide. Commander Harkon's voice continued, "Your world is threatened. Your enemies gather. We do not promise peace. We promise battle. If you wish to live, prepare yourselves." The message ended. Silence followed. The people of Carith looked at one another in shock. Their old allies had promised comfort, protection, and gentle words, but the Deathworlders spoke only of war. In the council chamber, one advisor shouted in panic, "This is madness. They will destroy us all." Another whispered, almost in awe, "Or they will save us." Outside, the city was alive with confusion. Children still pointed at the ships with wide eyes, imagining heroes. Soldiers felt a strange thrill in their blood, watching those massive war machines take position. But elders, the ones who remembered the old tales, shook their heads. "Be careful," they warned. "Deathworlders never fight without reason, and their reason is not always ours." High above, inside the flagship Iron Fang, Commander Harkon studied the alien world. His eyes were sharp, his face scarred from countless battles. Around him, the crew moved with precision. They were not here for glory. They were here because they understood war. One officer turned to him. "The Carithians look weak. Their defenses are broken. Why do we help them?" Harkon's voice was low but firm. "Because the Vorash are worse. And if the Vorash spread, they will reach our worlds too. Today we fight for them. Tomorrow we fight for ourselves." The crew nodded. Among Deathworlders, survival was always the first law. On the planet below, the Carithian leader gathered the council. They argued in fear and hope. Some wanted to welcome the Deathworlders as saviors. Others wanted to shut down communication to hide and pray the humans would leave. Finally, the leader raised his hand. His voice was steady, though his heart trembled. We called for help. Help has come, though not the kind we wished for. If we reject them, we stand alone against the Vorash. If we accept them, we gamble with our very future. But we have no choice. That night, a signal was sent back. The Carithians would accept the Deathworlders' aid. The response came swiftly. A massive Deathworlder shuttle broke through the atmosphere, roaring like thunder as it descended. Its hull glowed red. From re-entry, its engines shaking the ground. The people gathered in the landing fields, hearts pounding. Soldiers lined the edges, weapons in hand, unsure if they were to guard or to welcome. With a heavy crash, the shuttle touched down. Dust and fire filled the air. The doors opened. Figures emerged, tall, armored, and scarred. The Deathworlders stepped onto Carithian soil. Their boots struck the ground like drums of war. Their eyes scanned every face, sharp and unyielding. At their center walked Commander Harkon. His presence was like a storm. The crowd parted in silence as he moved forward. He stopped before the Carithian leader. For a long moment, no one spoke. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Harkon spoke in a low, steady voice. You called, we answered. From this day, your war is our war. But know this, when Deathworlders fight, there is no turning back. The leader bowed his head. We accept. Around them, the crowd erupted in a mixture of cheers and cries. Relief and terror tangled together. The war for Kareth had begun. Above the twin suns, the sky was torn apart by fire. The Vorash swarm descended like a storm, their ships blotting out the stars. And waiting for them, smaller but unyielding, the Deathworlder fleet stood ready. The Iron Fang, Commander Harkon's flagship, led the charge. Its engines burned like comets as it plunged into the enemy line. Around it, Deathworlder ships moved with brutal precision. They did not fight like the graceful council fleets who relied on elegant formations and careful defense. The Deathworlders fought like predators, tearing straight into the heart of the swarm. Lasers cut the void. Missiles streaked like falling stars. Explosions erupted, painting the darkness in fire. Target engines, barked Harkon. Make them bleed before they strike the planet. His officers obeyed without hesitation. One Vorash warship shuddered as its rear engines blew apart, spinning helplessly into the void. Another was rammed head-on by a Deathworlder cruiser, both ships erupting in a storm of fire. The Carithians watched from the ground, stunned. Their skies had never seen such fury. These were not soldiers who fought for honor. These were warriors who fought for survival. On the surface, the clash was no less savage. Vorash dropships screamed through the clouds, landing in the streets of Kareth's capital. Doors blew open and armored Vorash warriors poured out, their weapons glowing with cruel fire. The Carethian defense lines wavered. Soldiers fired wildly, panic trembling in their arms. Entire squads fell as the Vorash advanced with brutal discipline, and then came the Deathworlders. They hit the ground like thunder. Heavy boots crushed the soil. Armored figures advanced in tight lines, rifles spitting. Fire! The sound of their weapons was deafening, a relentless roar that echoed through the streets. One Vorash squad moved to flank the Carithians, but a group of Deathworlders charged without hesitation. Their leader, a scarred sergeant named Vanar, shouted, "No fear, forward!" They fought like demons, their movements sharp and savage. A Vorash warrior raised his blade only to be tackled by a Deathworlder who drove a combat knife through his armor. Another human emptied his rifle into a Vorash at point-blank range, the flashes lighting his face like fire. For every alien who faltered, a Deathworlder pressed forward. Elaron, the council leader, watched from the safety of the high tower. His hands shook as he saw his people fight beside the humans. Some ran, yes, some fell, but others stood their ground for the first time. A group of young Carithian soldiers, inspired by the sight of their Deathworlder allies, held the line at the city gates. Plasma rifles hummed as they fired in unison, cutting down wave after wave of Vorash. Their commander shouted, hold for Kareth." A Deathworlder ran past them, laughing through the smoke. "That's it. Fight like you mean it," the Carethians shouted back, their fear turning into something new, something stronger. In the skies, the battle raged. The Deathworlders were outnumbered but not outmatched. They fought with chaos, breaking enemy formations, sacrificing ships to drag others into fire. Where the Vorash swarmed in perfect order, the humans struck like lightning, fast, unpredictable, merciless. On the Iron Fang, alarm screamed. A Vorash warship locked its weapons, preparing to obliterate the capital below. "Fire everything," Harkon growled. Missiles launched in a deadly storm. They struck the enemy ship one by one until the massive vessel split apart, burning as it fell into the atmosphere. The wreckage streaked across the sky, a falling star of death. The Carethians below gasped, torn between terror and awe. But the Vorash did not break. They pressed harder, sending more ships, more soldiers. Their voices roared through comms, a language of war and hunger. This was not just conquest. This was annihilation. In the streets, a Carethian soldier named Vela, once too afraid to hold her weapon, now fought with fire in her eyes. She remembered the Deathworlder who had saved her life. She remembered his command. Stand up. Fight. She stood now side by side with him, firing at the advancing Vorash. Her rifle burned hot, her hands steady. For the first time, she felt not fear, but strength. "Keep firing," the Deathworlder beside her shouted. "They bleed like anyone else." And so she did. And so did many others. The first clash shook the world of Kareth. Cities burned, skies burned, even the oceans lit with fire as wreckage fell from the heavens. But something unexpected happened in the chaos. The Carethians did not run. They did not surrender. For the first time in generations, they fought, not because they were ready, not because they were strong, but because they had no other choice, and because the Deathworlders demanded it. Above, Commander Harkon watched the tide of battle shift. His ships bled, his soldiers fell, but the Vorash were pushed back step by step. It was not victory, not yet, but it was survival. He leaned forward, eyes like steel. "Good," he muttered. "Now they understand." The first clash was not the end. It was only the beginning, and from that moment on, the Vorash would learn something terrible. Kareth was no longer alone. The first clash had shaken the world of Kareth. The cities still burned, the skies still roared with fire, but the Vorash had been pushed back for now, yet victory was far away. From the towers of the capital, the people watched the horizon. Smoke covered the suns, and the ground trembled as the war continued. Families huddled in shelters, whispering prayers. Soldiers, once weak and afraid, now stood bloodied but unbroken. And high above, the Deathworlder fleet still fought. Inside, the Iron Fang, Commander Harkon studied the battle map. The Vorash swarm stretched endlessly across the stars. For every ship destroyed, more arrived. His officers reported damage, casualties, entire wings lost. But Harkon's face remained calm. "They will not stop," one officer said bitterly. "They will grind us down." Harkon's eyes narrowed. "Then we will not stop either. A war of endurance is a war we know how to win." That was the truth of the Deathworlders. They did not win because they were stronger. They won because they refused to die. On the ground, the Carethian soldiers felt this truth for the first time. At the city's northern wall, Vela and her squad fought side by side with the humans. The Vorash advanced in waves, their armored forms crashing against the barricades. Each time, the Carethians thought they would be overwhelmed, and each time, the Deathworlders refused to fall back. A Deathworlder sergeant stood atop the wall, shouting over the roar of plasma fire. "Hold the line! You give one step, they take your world. Stand or die." His armor was scorched, his arm bleeding. Yet he fought as if nothing could stop him. Vela looked at him with wide eyes. How could anyone stand so long against such terror? And then she realized, this was their way. This was the way of a death world. No retreat. No surrender, only survival. In the council chambers, Ilaran listened to the chaos outside. Reports poured in, streets lost, streets reclaimed, fires spreading, people fleeing. His advisors begged him to order surrender, to send a message to the Vorash begging for mercy. They will kill us all, one cried. We cannot fight forever. Ilaran shook his head. His voice trembled but held firm. We cannot surrender. Look outside. Our people are fighting. They are fighting because the Deathworlders gave them no choice. If we surrender now, everything we have lost will mean nothing. The chamber fell silent. For the first time, even Ilaran believed his own words. Above the battlefield, the Vorash launched their next strike. Massive carriers opened their holds, releasing swarms of drones, metal beasts with wings of fire. They screamed through the skies, targeting defenses and civilians alike. The Carithians panicked. Even the bravest among them faltered. But the Deathworlders were ready. Commander Harkon's voice thundered through the comms. All ships, scatter and strike. Break their swarm. The Deathworlder fleet split apart, each ship diving into the cloud of drones. Cannons flared, missiles exploded, fighters weaved between enemies like predators in a storm. It was chaos. It was madness. But it worked. The drones fell in burning waves. The swarm broke. And for the first time, the Vorash pulled back. On the surface, the news spread like wildfire. The Deathworlders had turned the tide. The Vorash were retreating, if only a little. The people of Kareth lifted their heads. The children in shelters whispered that maybe, just maybe, they would live. The soldiers on the walls shouted in triumph, their voices raw but proud. Even Vela felt the change inside her. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She fired her rifle without trembling. She stood without bowing her head. One Deathworlder soldier beside her laughed as the enemy fell back. See? They're not gods. They bleed like the rest. You just have to fight long enough to see it. As night fell, the fires of war lit the sky brighter than the sun's. Both sides licked their wounds. Both sides prepared for the next strike. In the quiet between battles, Ilaran met with Commander Harkon inside the Great Hall. The human stood tall, his armor scarred, his eyes sharp as blades. Ilaran approached him slowly, his voice low. You fight with a fury I have never seen. You do not break. How is this possible? Harkon looked at him for a long time before answering. You call us Deathworlders, you are right. We come from a world that tries to kill us every day. Storms, beasts, hunger, fire. It does not matter. From the moment we are born, the world tells us we will not survive. And every day we prove it wrong. His voice dropped cold as iron. We do not fight because we want to. We fight because we must. And when the Deathworlders had arrived, and the people of Kareth could no longer deny the truth, their saviors looked more like conquerors. For 2 days, the fleet remained in orbit, their vast ships casting shadows across the skies. Deathworlder patrols swept over the cities, their gunmetal shuttles growling through the clouds. Every eye on Kareth followed them with awe and fear. Children pointed, soldiers gripped their weapons, and elders whispered warnings. The council, leader Ilaran, knew the time had come. They could not delay. They had to meet the Deathworlders face to face. Inside the capital's high council hall, the great chamber was prepared. Guards lined the walls, their hands tight around their spears and plasma rifles. Bright banners hung from the ceiling, though the colors seemed pale in the heavy air. Every citizen who passed outside the hall felt the weight of what was about to happen. The Deathworlder shuttle descended in fire and smoke. When its ramp lowered, armored figures marched out, their steps loud and unshaken. At their center was Commander Harkon. His presence alone filled the chamber with silence. Ilaran stepped forward, robes of silver flowing, his voice carefully calm. Welcome to Kareth. You have answered our call. We thank you. Harkon studied him, saying nothing for a long moment. His eyes were sharp, his jaw set like stone. Finally, he spoke. We heard your signal. We came. But understand this. Our fleet does not move for kindness. We are not here as saviors. We are here because war is coming and war must be met. The words struck the chamber like a hammer. Advisors shifted uneasily, some whispering among themselves. Elrond kept his voice steady. We seek protection. Our people are not soldiers. The Vorash strike us without mercy. Will you help us stand against them? Harkon's gaze swept across the council members. We will fight, but your people must learn. We will not carry you on our backs. If you wish to live, you must bleed beside us. Gasps filled the chamber. One advisor shouted, You dare demand blood from us? We called for allies, not masters. In an instant, Deathworlder soldiers raised their weapons. The room trembled with tension. The alien guards raised theirs in return, and for a heartbeat the hall stood at the edge of chaos. Harkon lifted his hand, and the Deathworlder weapons lowered. His voice was low, but it carried like thunder. You misunderstand. We do not come to rule you. We come to teach you how to survive. Deathworlders know war better than any in this galaxy. If you wish to live, you must learn from us. The council fell into silence. They could not deny the truth. The Vorash had crushed every defense Kareth once had. Without the Deathworlders, they were doomed. Elrond spoke again, quieter now. And if we refuse? Harkon leaned forward, his face hard, his eyes cold. Then you will die, and your world will burn. And when the Vorash come for us next, we will fight without you. The chamber shuddered with fear. Even Elrond felt his breath falter. The choice was no longer truly a choice. One elder, voice trembling, whispered, They are demons, but demons are better than death. The council leader raised his hand to quiet them. His heart pounded, yet he stood tall. Very well. We accept your terms. Teach us, if that is what must be done. Harkon gave a single nod. Then it begins. That night across the cities, the Deathworlders moved among the people. Soldiers in dark armor stood in training fields, shouting commands in harsh, clipped words. They taught Carithian soldiers how to hold weapons, how to strike, how to fight without fear. Many failed, many fell, but the Deathworlders showed no pity. The enemy will not wait, one human sergeant growled. You learn now or you die tomorrow. Families watched from the edges, their faces pale. Mothers pulled their children close. Fathers whispered prayers. The Deathworlders were not gentle teachers, but already some Carithians began to change. Their hands steadied. Their hearts grew harder. In the council chambers, advisors argued deep into the night. Some said they had invited monsters into their home. Others said only monsters could fight monsters. Elrond sat in silence, staring at the stars beyond the window. Above them, the fleet of Deathworlders still circled, black shadows against the twin suns. He thought of the message they had sent. We are coming. Yes, they had come. But at what price? Far above, aboard the flagship Iron Fang, Harkon spoke with his officers. They are weak, soft. They will break under the weight of war. Another officer asked, Then why teach them? Harkon's eyes narrowed. Because when the Vorash come, every blade matters. And because the Deathworlders fight best when the enemy fears not just us, but those who stand beside us. A heavy silence followed. The Deathworlders were not known for mercy. They were known for survival. And on Kareth, survival now belonged to those willing to follow them into the fire. The uneasy meeting was done. The Deathworlders had spoken, and the people of Kareth had no choice but to listen. Hope and fear walked together in every heart. For the first time, the Carethians began to wonder, had they been saved, or had they opened their gates to something far more dangerous? For days, the Deathworlders drilled the Carethians, the once proud people who had lived in shining towers and peaceful oceans now stood trembling in dusty fields, struggling to learn the art of war. Their hands shook as they gripped weapons, Their voices faltered when the Deathworlders sergeants barked orders. But training could not change destiny. Not so quickly. And destiny was already approaching. The first sign came as a whisper. A faint distortion in the long-range scanners. A strange energy signature in deep space. At first, the Carithians hoped it was only static. But the Deathworlders knew better. Aboard the flagship Iron Fang, Commander Harkon leaned over the display. Red blips pulsed like drops of blood. His officers worked in silence, their faces grim. "It is them," one officer confirmed. "Vorash, fleet, large." "How large?" Harkon asked. The officer swallowed. "Enough to erase this world." Harkon did not flinch. His voice was steady, hard as iron. "Then they will try. Prepare the fleet." On the surface, the skies darkened. The Carithian people gathered in streets and towers, staring upward. At first, they saw nothing. Then, slowly, the stars themselves began to vanish. Great shadows filled the heavens. Shapes, so vast they blocked out the suns. The Vorash had come. Their ships were monstrous things, black and spined, like insects of metal and hate. They spread across the orbit like a swarm, their weapons glowing with cruel fire. Panic tore through the cities. Families ran to the shelters, children cried, elders collapsed in despair. The council chambers erupted in chaos. Advisors shouted, their voices trembling. "They are too many. We cannot fight them. This is the end." Eleron, the council leader, stood frozen, his heart hammering. For weeks he had hoped for salvation. Now staring at the swarm of Vorash ships, he wondered if the Deathworlders could truly save them at all. Then the Deathworlders struck. From orbit, their fleet moved with ruthless precision. The dark warships of humanity turned as one. Engines, roaring weapons charging. Fire ripped across the skies as the first salvos launched. Explosions bloomed like new stars in the void. The battle had begun. On the surface, the Carithians stared in awe. Their saviors did not hesitate. The Deathworlders hurled themselves into the fight like predators diving into blood. Their ships, though fewer, moved with ferocity, tearing through Vorash lines. But the Vorash were relentless. For every ship that fell, 2 more took its place. Their swarm pressed forward, spitting fire and destruction. In the training fields below, the Deathworlder sergeants barked orders at the Carithian soldiers. "To the walls! Man the weapons! This is no drill!" The aliens stumbled, their training only half-formed. But fear was a powerful teacher. They obeyed, dragging plasma rifles to the barricades, powering up defenses that had not been used in years. For the first time, the Carithians fired not in desperation, but with purpose. "We fight. We fight until only one side is left standing." Eleron felt the words like a blade in his chest. The truth was clear. This was why the Deathworlders had turned the tide. This was why the Vorash for the first time hesitated. The humans were not fighting for glory. They were fighting because survival was the only law they knew. That night, across the city, the Carithians whispered a new name. Not saviors, not conquerors. They called the Deathworlders something else. The Unbroken. And for the first time, the people of Kareth dared to believe that they too might endure. The turning point had come. But dawn would bring another storm. The war had raged for days. The skies of Kareth were black with smoke. The oceans glowed with burning wreckage, and the ground trembled with the echoes of battle. But at last, the Vorash swarm was broken. The survivors fled into the void, their great ships limping away, engines bleeding fire. The Deathworlder fleet did not pursue. They had fought enough, for now. From the shattered cities below, the people of Kareth watched in silence. They had expected destruction, and they had received it. Yet they still lived. The Vorash were gone. For the first time in weeks, the sky was empty. In the capital, survivors poured into the streets. Their homes were ruined, their towers broken, their families scarred. But they still breathed. Children clung to their mothers. Soldiers leaned on one another. Elders whispered prayers of thanks. Everywhere, the same name passed from lip to lip. Deathworlders. The very word carried both terror and hope. They were monsters, yes, but monsters who had stood between Kareth and the endless night. At the council hall, the leaders gathered. They were weary, their robes torn, their eyes heavy with grief. Yet there was relief among them. Ilaran, the council leader, stood before the chamber. His voice was rough, but it carried. Our world still stands. Our people still live. And for this, we owe a debt we can never repay. Murmurs of agreement filled the chamber. But beneath the relief was fear. Because everyone knew, when Deathworlders gave something, they always took something back. The Iron Fang descended to the surface once more. Its engines shook the earth as it landed in the ruins of the capital square. The ramp lowered, and Commander Harkon walked down, surrounded by his armored soldiers. The Carethians bowed their heads, some in gratitude, others in dread. Ilaran stepped forward, his robes brushing the ash. Commander Harkon, on behalf of all Kareth, I thank you. Without you, we would be dust among the stars. Harkon's gaze swept over the ruins, the broken towers, the wounded people. His face betrayed nothing. You survived, he said simply. Ilaran hesitated. We did, because of you. Harkon shook his head slowly. Because of us, yes, but also because you fought. You learned. Without that, you would already be gone. The words cut deep, but they were true. As night fell, fires burned across the city. Around them, Deathworlder soldiers moved like shadows, tending to the wounded, distributing supplies, standing guard. They gave no comfort, no warmth, only survival. Children peered from behind their parents, watching the humans with wide eyes. Some whispered that they were saviors. Others whispered that they were devils. To the Deathworlders, it made no difference. In the council chambers, Ilaran met with Harkon alone. The room smelled of smoke and blood. Tell me, Ilaran asked, voice heavy with doubt. Why did you come truly? Was it mercy, or was it only because the Vorash threatened your kind as well? Harkon's eyes were cold as steel. Mercy is a story you tell children. We do not fight for mercy. We fight because if the Vorash are not stopped here, they will come to us next. And when they do, we will already be ready. Ilaran's heart sank. So we were only a battlefield to you. Harkon did not deny it. Every world is a battlefield, yours, ours, it does not matter. Survival is the only law. The silence was heavy. Ilaran bowed his head. Then still, we thank you. Harkon's expression softened for the briefest moment, but his next words froze the air. Do not thank us. Remember us, because the next time we come, it may not be for your enemies. Those words spread quickly. Soldiers whispered them by firelight. Families repeated them in fear. Next time, we may not come for help. The Deathworlders left soon after. Their fleet rose into the black sky, engines burning. Like the wings of demons, the people of Kareth stood below, watching in silence, unsure if they had witnessed salvation or the first step into something far darker. In the weeks that followed, the Carethians rebuilt. Their towers were scarred, their oceans poisoned, their fields burned. But they worked. For the first time, they worked not as a peaceful, fragile people, but as survivors. They trained, they prepared, and always, they remembered the lessons of the Deathworlders. Do not run, do not bow, do not break, survive. Far away in the dark halls of a Vorash warship, the enemy licked its wounds. A commander stared at the stars, his claws curling in rage. Deathworlders, he hissed. They will pay for this. And deep in space, aboard the Iron Fang, Harkon stood at the command deck, eyes fixed on the endless void. They will come, again, he said quietly. The Vorash always do, and when they do, we will be ready. His officers nodded, silent and grim. The war for Kareth was won, but the war for the galaxy had only begun.